Welcome, everyone, to Coffee with a Codex. My name is Dot Porter, and I am a curator in the Kislak Center for Special Collections, Rare Books, and Manuscripts at the University of Pennsylvania. Pardon me. I split my time with the Schoenberg Institute for Manuscript Studies, which is a research and development institute in the Kislak Center, and we study manuscripts, as you can guess. Once a week, I take a book off of our shelves and I show it to you in a sort of informal show and tell. So if you have been here before, welcome back and you know the drill. If you're new, feel free to type questions or comments in the chats as we go. My colleague Amy Hutchins is here. She is our manuscripts cataloger, and she will be on the chat to answer questions and other things while we go forward. So I'm really excited about today's manuscript. I want to apologize again to those of you watching the video or those of you who came in a little bit later. Because of technical issues, I had to zoom in on my phone, and the video is not as high quality as it usually is. So I apologize for that. But we're going to make do. It looks like if we zoom in, things look better. So I'll be doing a lot of zooming in as we go through. So this is an early 13th century Bible. Early 13th century being in 1220s is what the record says. The binding is an 18th century binding. So a much, much later binding. But it's got these nice clasps. So it's all held together. Sort of leather over boards, not wooden boards. This is sort of a heavy cardboard board, but just fine. And it's got those nice clasps. So there's some interesting stuff happening with this Bible because there's a lot more in this book than just the Bible. When we open it up, let's see. There's some sort of later things, but I'm really interested here. All right. So it starts out with this section, which is, I'm reminding myself what this is called. It is the interpretations of names in Hebrew is how it's translated in English, attributed to Jerome, who translated the Bible in the Middle Ages. And I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see this. Basically, what he's doing in this section, or what is happening here, is it has every Hebrew name that appears in the Bible in alphabetical order and a little sort of description of what the name means. So if I zoom very, very far in, hopefully you'll be able to see it a little bit better. So we're in the A section. There is something that the scribe has done to sort of help you, because there's a lot. This is small writing on a big page. So there is a lot on each page. Yes, or Amy says what they thought the name meant. Of course. Thank you. Not necessarily what it actually meant. I'm actually going to start my video so you can see me. Hi guys. All right. So what they're doing, of course, is every 5 names, the first letter switches color. So we're going back and forth between blue and red, and they did this to sort of help your eyes move through the page. And this is something that we see a lot in medieval texts, particularly of this sort of time period, and especially when there's a lot of writing on the page. So scribes who go back and forth using, oftentimes it's blue and red, to sort of help you from skipping words as you go. So I'm going to skip ahead. So this goes on for many, 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 many pages here. And the Bible itself starts on 28 recto. Although there's something else too before we get to the Bible text. So the list of Hebrew names ends here. You can see it's about a little over a quarter of that last page. This is 27 recto. And then on the 27 verso, there is a prayer, the prayer of Manasseh. I think that's how it's pronounced. And it's sort of a, I looked it up because I hadn't actually heard of this prayer before. It's a sort of a short penitential prayer attributed to King Manasseh of Judah. And so, although it's probably not written by him. So this prayer, I'll mention it again later because it is actually usually associated with the end of another book of the Bible. And so often it will appear there, inserted between these other books. In this Bible, it's written up here instead, and then there's a note at the end of that book saying where you can find the prayer if you're looking for it. All right, and then we start with the prologue to Genesis. So in the Middle Ages, these Bibles, it didn't just go always from one book to the next. They have prologues sort of that lead up to each one or occur between each one. This one I quite like because it has this little inhabited initial called inhabited because there's a little guy in it. And we don't know exactly who this is. So it could be Jerome, could be someone, but he looks like a monk, a little medieval monk, and he's a scribe. So he is writing. You can sort of see it looks like he has a pen in one hand, and it could be he's got a knife in the other hand, which is something you see quite a bit because the knife is how you would erase text. You would scrape the text off if you make a mistake. So there's our scribe, and there's some gold. There's a lot of gold in this manuscript, and a lot more of these little initials that we'll see. Most of them are going to be what we call historiated initials. Historiated initials are also initials that have little guys in them, but they tell a specific story or are specific people. And so that's why we call them historiated as opposed to inhabited. Oh, Mary and Henry, the pen knife was used to sharpen the quill. Okay. I'm sure it was both because I think it was definitely used to scrape off ink as well, but I can see that it would also be used to sharpen the quill. Louisa is asking, is there a way to navigate to particular folios in the digitization on the website? Amy, can you help with that question?
Yes, it's probably easier to say than to type. If you follow the link that's in the chat to the record in Franklin, our online library catalog, there's a link there that says something like view for browsing Calenda. And if you go there will be thumbnails of the pages that you can click on to go directly to them.
Thank you. All right, and now we have, so that's the prologue. That was the start of the prologue of Genesis, and now we get to Genesis itself, and we get some more of these fantastic little, in this case, these are just decorations. They're not initials. But the big stories in Genesis. So we have Adam and Eve being tempted by the serpent. And then we have Noah's Ark, the tiny little ark, but we all know what it is. So there's Noah with the animals and the water. And then we have Abraham and Isaac here. So the sacrifice of Isaac. And Amy is pointing out that it is a huge eye for in principio. So it looks to me like it's just decorative, but it is in fact a very big, the biggest eye that you will see. So there we go. I also want to point out actually on the other side, in addition to these initials, there are also a lot of these sort of, they're going to be mostly red and blue, and there's a little bit of green there too. these decorated initials as well, which I think are not quite as fancy, but they're still quite attractive. And if you look over here, you can see that it's the gold that's doing this. The gold from the initial on the other side has imprinted itself into the parchment. There's a chemical reaction that's happening there. And this kind of thing can actually be helpful for modern scholars to see if leaves have been cut out of books. Sometimes you'll be paging through and you'll see something like this and there's nothing on the other side and you're like, oh, something has happened here. And that can be pretty interesting. So the rest of this is the Bible. And if you haven't seen a medieval Bible before, there are some things that that I can point out to you or that you might notice that are really distinctive of sort of the medieval, the way that medieval Bibles are organized, sort of in contrast to modern Bibles. One thing is, and it's all about sort of navigation, because the Bible is huge and there's a lot going on, and how do you find your place? So one thing that you'll always see in Bibles like this, 13th century Bibles, is titles across the top of the page. So this is Gene, so Gene, it's Genesis. And so if we open it up into Genesis, we're going to know that that's where we are, because it says it on the top of the page. In modern Bibles, the text is divided into chapters and verses, and that practice of verses is more modern, more recent than these. So you do see chapter numbers here. That's what these Roman numerals, and you'll see them like here in the margin. You'll also see them in line. So there's another one here. There's another chapter over on the next page. There's one in the middle of the line there, and another one here. So there are chapter numbers that will help you find your way, but there's no verse numbers because they didn't do verses at this point. That's a later thing. Something else interesting that's happening here is there is a little note in the margin, and I see there's also one that's coming up on the next page. I'm pretty sure that this is text that was not copied originally by the first scribe, and so it's been sort of added in into the margin, and this is pointing to here's where the text is supposed to go here, rather than being in any other manuscript. I would think that it was a note about the text, but this is not a book that has textual notations added. This is really about the text of the Bible. All right, so let's keep moving on, because I want to get to some more of these initials. So here's another one, and we have moved to a different book, and I know we have because we are now in Exodus. So we're in Exodus now, and here is the historiated initial for Exodus. Come on. There we go. So that looks like, it's Moses, actually. I know that's Moses because he is holding a tablet, and I think it looks like that's maybe water in front of him, and he has horns. Moses was presented as having horns, and it had to do with Jerome's translation, and I can't remember. Amy, do you remember what exactly? It has to do with saying, instead of saying something like he had light coming out of his head, it says he had horns coming out of his head. And so he's presented often with horns. Okay, so that's Exodus. Leviticus. I know we're in Leviticus. Here we go. Leviticus, there across the top. Yeah, sorry, this is it is in Latin. This is a Latin translation. It's the Vulgate, which is that's the translation that Jerome made, and so the Vulgate Bible is the Latin Bible that was used primarily through the Middle Ages. So now we're in Exodus, and we have, looks like a lamb being sacrificed. There are no verses. Yes, question in the chat. There are no verses. There are chapters. So they would quote by chapter, but not verse. Okay, Leviticus. I'm not going to have time to look at every single one because it's actually some interesting stuff happening afterwards. And actually, it looks like not every book gets an opening initial either. We're in Deuteronomy, Deuto. Sometimes you get the full, oh, you didn't see that, Deuto. Sometimes you get the full chapter, or the full title, book title written above. In this manuscript, it is not. So this is what it looks like when we go from one book to the next. So we're going from, we have Deuteronomy here, and it's quite late. This is, what is this, 34? So this is the 34th chapter of Deuteronomy. And then we're moving to the next book, which Iosue, Yosu. I'm not sure what book that is, but we've moved to, Amy, do you know what book this is? Joshua, thank you. So we're going from Deuteronomy to Joshua. They are not wasting any parchment. The Deuteronomy ends here, and then we have a prologue to Joshua here with its own pretty, let me zoom in a little bit because that's quite a little, pretty little initial. And then on the next page, the prologue ends and we jump right into Joshua, and we have another initial here. Let's see if we can get a little closer. There we go, a little gold. So there we go. So this is how we go from chapter to chapter. So in this case, we actually have we have book titles written, two titles written on top of one. So we have Deuteronomy and Joshua. So we know that this is where that change is happening. Let's see. And you can see that there are more places where text has been missed and has been put back in. That usually happens because of something called, or I should say it often happens because of iskip, which just means that the scribe copied to a word and then looked, and wrote it down and then went back to the text and saw that word again and started copying, but they didn't look at the right word instance of the word, and so they end up missing text that goes between those two words. So that's a pretty common thing to see. There's a question in the chat. Michelangelo's Moses had horns, so the horns came from Jerome's incorrect translation. And then, as Amy says, I believe so, it was standard medieval iconography. And it really was. If you see any medieval manuscript you look into, Moses is going to have horns. It's just something that you see. I put a note in here because there's something weird happening here. We have Judith here, and then we have Job here. And so we have the end of Judith. Judith ends here, and then we have the start of the prologue, but then we have chapter numbers. So we have chapter 4 and chapter 5 and chapter 6 of Job here. What happened is the leaf here is gone. This leaf has been cut out. Presumably it had an initial on it. although I don't see any kind of imprint over here. So I don't know when it was cut out, but if we, I hope you can see this. If we come down here, there is a stub of that leaf here. There's a little bit of parchment here, and this leaf on this side is actually sliced through. It's been sliced through. So people are asking about, is Judith part of Apocrypha? And they skip the book of Ruth. Books are in different order. There's a different order, and I should have looked at this before today. But I do know that there's a slightly different ordering. So I think Ruth is in here. It's just in a different place. I also could be wrong. So I don't know. Since we're not looking at every single book. And unfortunately, there's no list of books in the record that have the record in order. All right. Oh, there's a nice initial. So I want to we'll pause and look at a few more. Oh, this is nice. Page over here. Ecclesiastes. We have a decorated initial and then another one. So this is the prologue, and then that's the start of the book, and the end of the parables there. Okay. I'm going to skip ahead. Where did that? Let's see. Let's see. Zacharias. Here we have Zacharias. And I think here's where we're going. Oh, this is just a decoration down here. So I hope you can see. Oh, I'm getting my computer back next week, so this is never going to happen again. It looks like there's a little winged guy sitting on the head of a dragon, which is kind of fun there. This is 335 verso, if you want to take a look at that. Joyce asks, are there later manuscripts in which the horns on Moses represent the devil? I have no idea, actually. I don't know enough about iconography to know that. Let's see. Luke. So now we're in Luke, so we're in the New Testament. And okay, and then we've got Acts, and let's see. Oh, here's Jesus. We have found Jesus there. Very nice. And then I just quickly want to look at what comes after the Bible, which is pretty unusual, actually, for a Bible, and I think it suggests who this book was for. So this is a calendar, and if you've looked at books of hours, you've seen something like this, because books of hours, which is a sort of very common or popular sort of medieval prayer book that was used by lay people, open with calendars. And the calendar is basically a chart of the year telling you on what days to celebrate which saints. And so we have January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. So it's usually in a book of hours, you'll have 12 6 or 12 pages, but here they're all sort of crammed onto one page. And this is pretty unusual, and it's followed by a missal, which is the liturgical book for the Mass. So these are the texts that a priest would use when celebrating Eucharist. And here's a lovely crucifixion. And here we have an inhabited initial. That is a monk kneeling with a cup in front of him, the cup of wine for the blood of Christ, for the Eucharist. And so this was for that. And then after the missal, there is a breviary. And a breviary is the liturgical book that's used for the canonical hours. And the canonical hours, these are prayers that are said and rituals that are done throughout the course of a day for monastic people who live in monasteries, so nuns and monks. And so the monastic hours are set out in this section. So we have a Bible, we have a calendar that reminds us of what saints we celebrate on which days and when holidays are. We have the missal for the Mass, and then we have the breviary for the canonical hours. And what this says to me is that this was probably a Bible that was used in a monastery, because it sort of has everything there. It has the Bible text, it has the missal, the breviary, it has parchment cut out from the bottom of the page here. I noticed this earlier. I don't know why. This is something that you see sometimes, though, just slices of parchment cut out. And it could be that there was something written there that they wanted to take out. And it could also be that they needed scrap. And it's really hard to say which one, but you see that sometimes. And then at the end, there's even more here. This is a table of Epistle and Gospel incipits. Incipits, that means the first line or the first few words. Incipit meaning sort of begins, and explicit is the ending. And so this is a table of epistles and gospels, and it is a later hand. So if we do a quick, it's hard because the resolution is not good, but the writing is quite, let me zoom in a little bit. So this is the 1220 handwriting or script, and here is the later one. And it is similar, but clearly not the same person and a little bit later. So that is all of it of MS Codex 236. Thank you for sticking with me, even though the resolution is not great. And I really appreciate you coming. And I promise next week we will have another beautiful manuscript, and I'll have my computer back, and we'll be able to have a nicer, better look. I do encourage you to look at the digital images because they are very nice. So thanks for coming. Thanks, Amy, for putting in the links again. And I hope I will see you all again soon, and have a great week.